Our next speaker, Justin Raimondo, is the editorial director of antiwar.com, which is the leading libertarian anti-war site on the internet. If you're not familiar with antiwar.com, you should get yourself acquainted because it is absolutely fantastic. It is... constantly updated with both news articles, commentaries, editorials. It's clear that they look at every one of these articles they link to, and they're virtually all from a libertarian perspective, but many conservatives, many leftists. It's a fantastic site. And one of the reasons it's so fantastic is because of Justin's column. You owe yourself a real treat to look at his archives. His columns are hard-hitting, they're hardcore, but also very, very entertaining. You can't get through one of his articles without cracking a smile. They're very, very nice. He's the author of 3 books, including his most famous one, Reclaiming the American Right, The Lost Legacy of the Conservative Movement. He's a regular contributor to American Conservative and Chronicles magazine. His talk is entitled War, Peace, and the Struggle for Liberty. Justin Raimondo.
Thank you, Bumper. To listen to the public spokespersons of the war party, one would think that the 9/11 attacks tore a hole in the space-time continuum and landed us in an alternate universe, a world where World War II never ended, where Churchill, Neville Chamberlain, and most of all, Hitler seem not to have died, where the atmosphere of crisis, of intellectual conformity, and of outright panic that suffuses the air in wartime has been lovingly recreated, like a remake of an old war movie. There is a reason why they constantly evoke the imagery of that global catastrophe, hailing the alleged heroism of Churchill, deriding the supposed cowardice of Neville Chamberlain, and promoting the weird cult of Franklin Delano Roosevelt amongst ostensible conservatives. After all, if you want to start a world war, it seems wise to recall and refit the tactics and maneuvers that led to the last one. And the parallels are striking. Once again, a coalition of foreign lobbyists and domestic interests has coalesced around a program of world war. Once again, a president has openly signed on to their agenda and is implementing it without regard to either the domestic consequences or the true nature of American interests abroad. It is a replay of history that, for all its variations and idiosyncrasies, extends to the domestic political scene, where a movement that spans both left and right has arisen to oppose the policy of perpetual war and the ruthless abrogation of civil liberties. On the left, all the best instincts of a liberalism that once we thought was lost is being revived. Once again, we are seeing the skepticism of government and hatred of war that caused Randolph Bourne to famously declare in the title of his essay, "War is the Health of the State." This brand of liberal thought was nearly extinguished by the modernizing managerial statism of the New Deal, and almost made us forget that the Democrats are, after all, the party of Jefferson. This is not to say that the anti-war net roots, so-called, are self-conscious Jeffersonian Democrats, but they are getting there. In the face of a systematic assault of Bush and his party on the very foundations of our old republic, rank-and-file Democrats and liberals of every description are rapidly recovering their long-lost anti-authoritarian, anti-war heritage. Now, another sort of heritage, albeit one that is not unrelated, is being rediscovered on the right. Since the first Gulf War, we have seen the rise of what has come to be called the old right. That is, the pre-World War II conservative ethos of such forgotten figures as Garrett Garrett, John T. Flynn, Rose Wilder Lane, Robert A. Taft, and the America First movement. This was a coalition of conservative Midwestern businessmen, libertarians, and old-style liberals who rose in opposition to Roosevelt's drive to war and to the more authoritarian aspects of a New Deal. The America First Committee, founded in the heyday of the old right's influence, was, up until the Vietnam War, the biggest anti-war movement in American history. Culturally, however, it was a very different sort of anti-war movement from the sort we have today, in that it was driven by conservatives, proto-libertarians, Midwestern progressives, such as Senator Burton K. Wheeler, and liberals of the old school, such as John T. Flynn. These people were all united in the fear that we would fight National Socialism overseas, only to wake up one morning to find ourselves saddled with an American version of the same super-centralizing, warmongering regime on our own shores. Politically, the demands of the old America First movement find their echo in today's coalition of anti-interventionist critics of the so-called war on terrorism, particularly in its Republican so-called realist wing. A recitation of the America First Committee's founding principles gives us a sense of deja vu. Quote, this is from their founding principles, quote, "The United States must build an impregnable defense for America. No foreign powers nor group of powers can successfully attack a prepared America. American democracy can be preserved only by keeping out of a European war. Aid short of war weakens national defense at home and threatens to involve Americans in war abroad," end quote. Now, if we apply this credo to the situation we find ourselves in today, we find that they make a pretty good summary of anti-interventionism on both the right and the left. The first principle of building, quote, "an impregnable defense for America's interests," end quote, presents in brief the realist school's primary emphasis on putting the defense of America first, over and above all considerations of collective security, and ruling out completely such idealistic concepts as spreading democracy throughout the world. The second principle of a prepared America prefigures not only the Republican realist perspective, but also that of the national security Democrats, as they call themselves, who criticize the Bush regime's lack of focus on the specific threat of al-Qaeda, as opposed to the diversion, as they see it, of regime change in Iraq. The third principle is really the essence of the old right's critique of the war in Europe, statism at home program of the Roosevelt administration, and anticipates as well the paleoconservative and libertarian fear of what Lew Rockwell has so trenchantly described as red state fascism. The America Firsters clearly saw the link between war abroad and creeping socialism and authoritarianism right here at home, a connection that our fake conservatives of the Rush Limbaugh and Coulter type just don't get. Conversely, a growing number of liberals, including Democratic Party activists, do get this connection and are gradually, or in some cases very rapidly, moving toward what might be termed a libertarian position. Now, the concept of aid short of war doesn't really translate into the contemporary idiom, having to do with aid to beleaguered Britain during the Blitz. But in general, it does relate to the larger issue of collective security, another concept that today's conservatives embrace wholeheartedly and which was anathema to their much wiser ancestors. The America First group also declared in its founding statement that its purpose was, quote, "to urge Americans to keep their heads amid rising hysteria in times of crisis," end quote. A sentiment that, unfortunately, not many conservatives, or liberals for that matter, shared on 9/11 and its aftermath.